As I'm sure everyone and their mother knows, the end of this month will be the end of the current story arc in the Kingdom Hearts series. It's quite a milestone. We'll be seeing this arc come to its conclusion, and we'll all be left speculating on how many spin-offs there'll be before we get to Kingdom Hearts 4. So before this train crashes in the most epic way possible, I randomly decided to take a look at the portable Kingdom Hearts games. These aren't all remembered as fondly as the console titles, but I feel that they spark interesting game design discussion. So here's my examination of the portable Kingdom Hearts games, starting with the most oddball game ever, the card-based RPG Chain of Memories. If you know me, you know I love my card games. Heck, I designed one myself. I don't consider this game to be some kind of brilliant creation. It's actually rather broken both ways, which is my way of saying if you don't cheese the game, it can get very frustrating, and if you do, the fun wears off rather quickly. I've played through it multiple times and even done challenge runs because I actually like the idea and wanted to like the game in general, but I would hesitate to recommend the game to a newcomer in the end. First, we'll discuss how the player moves between maps. The game is set in this building right here, Castle Oblivion. Inside the castle, everything is run by cards. You need cards to open doors, you need cards to fight, you probably need them to eat or to use the toilet too, which is why nobody ever has to do either of these things in this game. Joking aside, whenever you win a battle in this game, you get something called a map card, and map cards are used to move from one room in the castle to the next. Whichever map card you use determines what you'll find in the next room. Some cards create lots of enemies, stronger enemies. Some cards make you stronger physically or magically. There's even cards for shops, chests, etc. And save points as well. I bring this up because the whole map card thing is the most tedious thing ever and a seriously huge detriment to replay value. It seems to be designed to arbitrarily lengthen gameplay through grinding because you need to fight a lot of battles and get a lot of map cards. Most rooms require a specific number on your card in order to use it to enter. Although if you have a 0, that works on any door, except for the special doors that require you to sacrifice an arbitrary number of cards as well as a gold card. And the bosses are always behind these doors as well. Now these eventually become completely terrible. They get more and more demanding as time goes on. The cards require getting more and more specific, and if you haven't been saving a variety of color and number combinations, you could run into a door that stops you and forces you to grind until just the right number comes up. Like this one door that required any deuce. Well, I didn't have a deuce at the time, so I had to kill more and more enemies, except eventually I just decided to cheat because the card I needed never came up in the end. And if you think that door was bad, check out the one right before the final boss. Blue deuce, red 1, and more cards totaling 99. Map cards really have too much RNG to them. Not only is it random whether you will have the right card for each door like this, but you can only access a card shop by getting the room card for it, which took me half an hour in the replay I did to get the footage for this review. And I might as well mention here, if you aren't getting battle cards from encounters, where do they come from? Shops, of course, but where does the money come from? You get it by standing on and striking random objects in the various rooms. Sometimes cards and money pop out and you can grab them. You can assemble a decent collection so long as you hit lots and lots of objects in the castle, which probably sounds super tedious. Especially since if the card pops out but you run into an enemy before grabbing it, it vanishes when you exit the battle. And remember, this and the shops are your only methods of gaining new cards for actual use in battle, which means your options are determined completely by luck. Even if you want to use the broken strategies I'll eventually use, it takes some luck to gather the components. More so if you want the numbers on the cards to be high. Now, it should be noted that the PS2 remake adds 2 map cards that severely cut down on the tedium. The first is the roulette room. The name's a bit of a misnomer. Winning a battle in a roulette room lets you spin a wheel for a random map card from a selection, except you can stop the wheel on whatever card you want rather easily. The other card is the random joker, which can fulfill the requirements for any room in the game, including the special doors. Stupid door requires any number of cards totaling 99, a single random joker gets rid of all of that in one go. They drop less frequently on the higher difficulties though. However, cutting down on the tedium doesn't eliminate it entirely, and it really is arbitrary. The only reason really to fight enemies is for EXP and map cards. Enemies don't give you any battle cards unless you get lucky and they drop an enemy card, which I'll talk about more later. But I should mention that enemy cards are not actual attack cards, they're passive boosts, so no, you're not getting a new move or weapon. Mega Man Battle Network, the other GBA RPG with card-based battling mechanics and perhaps the best series to utilize card-based battling mechanics, awarded players with money or new cards if they completed battles skillfully, quickly, no damage, etc., which made battles far more rewarding and fun to farm cards. In short, this system of using map cards to move on in each of the worlds leads to massive amounts of grinding for more map cards. Meanwhile, fights don't reward you with better cards to fight with. Since I'm a huge fan of offering solutions for problems I find, here's mine. You can keep the room effects since they're actually pretty interesting, but randomize all the room effects, maybe guarantee only one chest room, one shop, one save point, etc. Get rid of the map cards completely and make the enemy encounters reward players with money or better cards. If you're worried that nobody will ever actually fight the enemies, you could make some encounters inescapable or punish dying more to encourage leveling. Certain mob fights are already required to be completed in order to progress. I just feel that they need to make the encounters matter a little more. Anyhow, as stated, Chain of Memories uses a card-based battle system. All of your attacks, magic spells, summons, items, and even your party members are all represented by cards that you use in an action environment. The cards in your deck are not shuffled. The order is determined by the order you added them to your deck, so you could order your attack cards to be selected first, and you don't have to use them in that order either. You can cycle through them. The main mechanic of the game is the number on the cards. These do not represent attack power or potency. What happens is, if a card effect is going, including attacks or magic, and someone else plays a card with a lower number, that card is deflected and they do nothing. If the card has a higher number, the existing card is cancelled, and its player is stunned while a new effect occurs, which is called a card break. In other words, if your numbers are always higher, your opponent can't do anything. Well, actually, if you have a 0, that will cancel any attack, but a 0 can in turn be cancelled by anything. So there is a risk to that, especially if the card effect lasts for a long while, such as a summon. But seriously, I can kind of understand why they would put such a system in place, but it's still dumb to do it this way no matter how you slice it. See, this game is trying to make Kingdom Hearts gameplay work on the GBA. The cards themselves and the deck create a sort of customizable menu because navigating the menu in the console games, even with the assignable shortcut buttons, tends to get annoying, so transitioning to a system with even less buttons meant that there had to be a much easier menu to navigate. And card breaks, they're there to give you a way to avoid attacks besides straight dodging, because considering the size of the screen and the size of the arenas in most fights in the GBA version, it can be difficult to actually dodge stuff, especially some of the special attacks. So they give you a method to avoid having to ever dodge anything at all, just card break anything in your path. All enemy attacks count as cards after all, and that also means despite the endless waves of Heartless, only one of them will ever be attacking at a time, which takes all the challenge out of mob fights. And because of card breaks, other mechanics they implemented kinda lose their point. Here's an example. All attack cards in this game represent the various keyblades Sora can acquire, but each card is only one swing with that keyblade. Sora uses attack cards in a 3-hit combo. Each keyblade does a different amount of damage based on where in that 3-hit combo the card was placed. There's a big difference between swinging the cards in random orders or knowing where to place each card in the combo. Besides being hard to remember on the fly where each card needs to be in order to maximize damage, considering you have to go into the journal to look it up, you're not ever going to use attack cards individually anyways. You're going to use slates. Slates are special attacks created through combinations of 3 cards. They include more powerful spells and summons like Blizzaga or Thundaga, and some special moves like Strike Raid, Ars Arcanum, Ragnarok, etc. The thing to keep in mind is that slates both have a very high potential damage output and the value of the slate when it comes to card breaks is equal to the total values of all 3 cards in the slate. A single card has a max value of 9, and slates break that frequently. So if you use lots of slates, you must be thinking they'll never be able to even do anything to you unless they have a 0. And you're right! All enemies in this game can be put into 2 categories. The first consists of the Heartless and most of the Disney bosses. The attacks these enemies possess are always the same number. The Shadow enemies at the start of the game never have anything higher than a 1, for example. Neo Shadows at the end of the game have 7s and 8s. They only have 0s every so often. I know Jafar has a 0 attack, but that's really all I can think of. So use slates on them and they'll never fight back. It's amazing. Even though using a slate renders one of its components unusable for the rest of the battle, if you end the battle quick enough, then this likely won't matter. You can set up your deck to be a triangle masher. And it so happens that Strike Raid and its elemental variants are extremely good at cleaning up trash mobs and getting lots of hits against static bosses in the GBA version due to how cramped the arenas are. Meanwhile, the remake has Blitz, Fire Aga, which homes in on enemies and does a lot of damage. There's a slate called Lethal Frame that inflicts stop on any enemy, including bosses. So encounters, like, they're just so easily trivialized that they don't feel like there's any real point to them. You can set up your deck to just mash triangle through them. Now while I'm at it, I should also talk about enemy cards. Enemy cards are dropped by enemies and bosses and provide a passive boost of some kind for a certain duration depending on the card. These actually add quite a bit of depth to the game. There are enemy cards that mess with the numbers on the cards. There are elemental power-ups with costs, second chance and auto-life for enemy cards. Oh, and in the remake, you can't go wrong with the Jafar card because it prevents your next 20 cards from being broken, including slates, thus eliminating the weakness of low-value slates like Ars Arcanum and Ragnarok. It originally only protected attack cards, so who knows what's up with this change. Which brings me to the second of the 2 categories of enemy. Certain bosses actually fight with their own decks, all with varied attacks and numbers and even their own slates and enemy cards. These include Riku, Cloud, the Organization 13 members, and Hades and Captain Hook for some reason. Since zeros and slates are far more frequent from these guys, it's significantly more random whether you'll take unavoidable hits or not, since they can throw out a 0 or a bigger slate whenever they want. They even use enemy cards, and there exist enemy cards that can cancel or even copy your opponent's enemy card, so these have a use outside of a Link battle. However, with Link battles omitted in the remake, these cards eventually become useless because the final boss doesn't use any enemy cards at all. So let's take inventory after that messy ranting I just did. My biggest problems with Chain of Memories are, card breaking makes it too easy to trivialize enemies if your numbers are higher, and if they aren't, you can barely do a thing. Enemies only attacking one at a time makes fights boring and unrewarding since you don't win battle cards based on skill, just luck. Remember, if you want to see all this done right, just play Mega Man Battle Network. It really did do all of this right. So, what would I change in the battle system itself? First, get rid of card breaks. They're causing nothing but issues. Players should need to actually dodge attacks and counter with their own. This is basic stuff. Enemies don't need to use cards the way the player does. I get that Riku and the Organization bosses use cards and decks for plot-related reasons because they're technically affected by the same magical Castle Oblivion-related magic thing that Sora is, but it honestly shouldn't come at the expense of the gameplay. Also, some players might scoff at this idea, but perhaps the player's deck should get shuffled in a hand of usable cards dealt. In TCGs, you're not only supposed to come up with a strategy to pile on the damage big time, you have to do it consistently too, with whatever the RNG decides to give you from your deck. If you can only do massive damage 5% of the time or whatever, that's a really bad deck. If you need some kind of icon on the cards where the numbers would be, perhaps the cards you collect could have extra properties on them added semi-randomly. Extra damage, extended combos, reduced deck cost, and additional healing are a few ideas. Chain of Memories is one of those games where the system is exploitable as all heck, and it's fun to see it exploited. Kind of like Final Fantasy VIII, in fact. The irony is not lost on me. Oh, and you'd think there would be some kind of optional boss or time attack mode so players could get the most out of their card collection. Battle Network frequently has a ton of post-game content. Chain of Memories has none. I kinda get that though. The remake was originally packaged with an update to Kingdom Hearts 2, so the extra game is a bonus by itself, but the remake was sold separately in the US. The remake also adds bonus cards based on the characters from future games. What's the point of this is if there's nothing to actually use them on? Well, actually, you do unlock a bonus mode where you play as Riku. His mechanics are way different from Sora. He never has to build his deck, the game builds it for him. This is both a blessing and a curse. If deck building annoyed you a lot in Sora's story, or if you thought it was too luck-based, then good for you. If you think deck building is kind of the point of a card game, then you're out of luck. Especially if the designers decided to give Riku a gimp deck for certain boss battles, which on occasion they did. So yeah, deck building was taken out, but of course, the lousy map card system was kept in. Oh well, at least it's fun to rip through enemies as Riku considering the bag of tricks he has up his sleeve. His mechanics aren't really the focus of this review, but I will say that I'm glad I can increase his attack power through leveling, which you can't with Sora. Sora can only increase his HP and deck capacity. Riku even has an arguably better plot than Sora's story, but he can also cheese every boss in an even worse fashion than Sora can, so pros and cons, I guess. Anyhow, that's my review of Chain of Memories and its battle system. Far too easily exploited, far too easy to trivialize. I may love card games, but I prefer card games where the challenge isn't either extremely easy or extremely painful, as even the easy way out requires some luck to get the cards you need. The heavy amount of luck involved means that every player is going to have a different experience on each playthrough. You might get very lucky and get all the cards you need very early on, or it might take lots and lots of grinding to do it. Luckily, the future portable Kingdom Hearts games deliver more interesting battle systems than this, along with their own problems, mind you, but that's a tale for another time. I won't stop anyone from trying this on the PlayStation 4, but I really can't recommend putting actual serious time into getting a platinum trophy or whatever.